Empire of Two Worlds by Barrington Bayley. So this book was copyright 1972, and I really didn't know a lot about this book. I had picked it up in a book haul, and I knew nothing about the author or the book. And then I saw a video from Stephen E. Andrews at the Outlaw Bookseller, and I'll link that below. And he really got me intrigued in Bayley as an author. He kind of described him as a cross between Alfred Bester and Philip K. Dick. And after reading this book, I totally get those associations. And while this might not be the best place to start with Bayley, it was the book I had, and I read it. And while I didn't completely fall head over heels with it, I'm definitely eager to read some more of Bayley's work. So right off the bat, I kind of want to give just a little warning about kind of some of the content that's in this book, and then I'll get into a little bit of the plot and kind of leave it there. So this book has a lot of adult themes, so if you got kids in the room, you might want to get them out. We got a lot of violence. There's sexual violence. There's backstabbing, drug use. There's talk of cannibalism, and all that comes from our main little cast of characters. If we go beyond that to some of the other entities or things they come across, you get torture, you get the threat of genocide, you get all kinds of things. So it is very kind of grim dark in that tone, and it did remind me a lot of some of these grimdark fantasies that I've read. You know, Joe Abercrombie, he writes a lot of this really kind of just dark, moralist characters. And you get a lot of this, but when I've read some of those fantasy books, it's described in graphic detail. I will say this book doesn't really go into any graphic detail in any of the content that I just went over. It's maybe a sentence or two just saying something happened, and then Bayley moves the plot right along. That's one thing I will say. This book was only like 155 pages, and it read like an Alfred Bester book. You just kind of went straight through it. So, and yeah, I guess I could say I read this in 2 short sittings. So it was a very easy read, and I never really got hung up on some of that graphic content. It just kind of went through. So with that being said, when you start off this novel, you're on a different planet, and it's a very dark, gray, lifeless planet, and humans are there. Humans just like we kind of think of ourselves, and they've been forced to kind of live in these towers or these buildings because there's nothing on the planet that they can use for any resources, whether it's for food or for energy or anything. They've somehow come from Earth at some point. You kind of get that impression. And they use nuclear energy to kind of power everything. And then for their food, they have a mixture of sewage and garbage that's kind of fermented in a way in these big vats, these tanks, and that's what everyone eats to survive. So it's a very bleak setting. Inside these towers, it's kind of set up with the hierarchy of classes. So the lowest people are kind of at the lowest points in these buildings, and the upper end is kind of reserved for the high-end people. But, you know, all of this, it's very kind of glossed over. Nothing is really completely detailed out in such a short book as this. And I'm going to go into what seems like it might be spoiler territory, but really it's only the first few chapters of the book, and then I'll just kind of leave it there, because this is a hard one to talk about without spoiling the book, but I'm going to give it a shot. So right when we start off, we get kind of a Mad Max style scene where these fugitives have kind of left this city, and they're being chased by the cops, and they end up shooting cops down, and it's just this really chaotic car chase scene, or they call them scoopers. It's kind of just shown there on the front. And you don't know why any of this is happening. And then right after the first chapter, Bayley kind of takes us back and sets up inside these cities on this planet, like what brought these characters to this point where they had to flee this city. Because if you flee this city, it's basically a death sentence. There's nothing on the planet you can live off of. And there are other cities, but it's kind of implied that they're not going to let you in. You're not going to survive. So you get the background of what happened to this cast of characters. And we find out that there was these almost like gangsters that had started these civilizations on the planet. They said they were kind of American and German gangsters that started this whole civilization on this planet. And there was a portal that had opened up and allowed people to come through, but then something happened and the portal closed, so they were trapped on this planet just trying to survive. And he describes a really interesting kind of society that has to just live off of this, whatever they can produce inside this city. There's no resources available outside of these cities, and there's many of these all over the planet, but it's really just focused on this. So we get the backstory of why these characters left. And they're kind of like this thuggish gang, and we got the ringleader of the gang. His name was Beckmath. And then we have our main character, who this whole story is written through his point of view, and his name was Klein. And then you have a alchemist who's kind of a scientist and chemist, and he's the only one that's really tried to read and learn anything. The rest of civilization just tries to survive. And then they got a couple other thugs with them. So you come to find out that they think that this portal might be opened again, and they're going to make a run for it and go back to Earth. And, we're thousands of years in the future, if not further, and they think that Earth is even further in the future because of the way this portal was set up. So then, it may sound like a spoiler, they find this portal, they go through the portal, and they make it to Earth. But what they find on Earth is completely different than what we think of Earth as. It's basically split into two kind of races. One lives on Earth and one lives on the moon. And there's a big pivotal, I wouldn't even say battle, but something's happening right along the same time that they come through this portal. So all of this converges. There's this battle, I guess, in a way, between the Earth and the moon. And then we have our little band of thugs that came from this foreign planet. And I'm going to leave it there because it would really get into spoiler territory if I go any further. The book was very interesting. It made you think about a lot of interesting themes. It's very dark, very nihilistic. Our main character is going along with all of this. He's part of the problem, part of the violence. He takes part in everything, but you do see a little glimmer of hope in our main character. And so as I was reading this, there was some things that kind of came to my mind. Like I'm wondering what was going to happen with our main character. I was really wondering if there was going to be some crazy plot twist, almost like a Philip K. Dick novel. There was a lot of things that were going through my mind as I was reading this. And the end was okay. I got maybe a third of what I was hoping for out of the end of the book. And overall, it did have, a slightly upbeat finale, but this book was very grim overall. So, if you're really into that kind of, dark, gritty, thuggish theme, then give this book a try. It's really short. It was a really fast read. It was written fairly well for what he was trying to do. This might not be my favorite thing I like to read about, but Bayley pulled it off. He set this tone. It was very dark, and I think he did a really good job with it. So that's where I'm going to leave it there. I am definitely excited to read more from Bayley. I like that fast pace action. There was no fluff in this book. It's nothing that I would want to read all the time, but definitely something to throw in the mix now and then. So, yep, so that's where we're at there. And next up, I'm reading The Paradox Men by Charles L. Harness. So just look for that video coming out in the future. And once again, thanks for watching.